known as the real-life Dracula, yet the way he died was brutal enough to make our souls shake. These are the brutal final hours of Vlad the Impaler, and today we're going to reveal every single lie about his heroic fate. Vlad's background. Before we talk about how Vlad actually died, you need to understand who he was, not from the outside world, but from the court. This guy wasn't even a fictional vampire, not the Halloween costume, but the man who ruled through psychological warfare that was so terrifying that entire armies turned back rather than facing him. Vlad III of Wallachia was born around 1428 in a small kingdom that was trapped between the rising Ottoman Empire and the Christian kingdoms of Hungary and Poland. This place should have been swallowed by history, where princes died quietly and were forgotten within a generation, which was increasingly happening at that time. But Vlad wasn't quite forgotten. By the 1460s, he had already created a military strategy so psychologically brutal that it didn't even matter if his army was smaller or bigger. It didn't matter if he faced enemies with superior numbers because he understood something that most rulers of that time didn't. He knew that terror, when it's real and soul-crushing, could do something that swords would never be able to do. His method was known as impalement. Thousands upon thousands of impaled corpses were arranged as a message to his enemies when he retreated from the Ottoman advance in 1462. He left behind what we know as the Forest of the Impaled. There were 23,000 stakes, each topped with a dying or rotting human body. Can you imagine the intensity of something like that? At first, this seemed like exaggeration or medieval propaganda to inflate numbers for dramatic effects. But it was actually documented by many independent sources, including the Greek historians who were there with the Ottoman forces. Mehmed II was known as the Conqueror, and this man had brought down Constantinople itself, which was one of the biggest cities of that time. This type of wind was something that the world wanted to do but couldn't, so when he arrived in the battle there to crush Vlad, he found himself staring at oceans of corpses, thousands of them arranged like an eerie-looking garden. Many were still alive, just rotting in the sun. What makes this significant is Mehmed's reaction after seeing what happened. The man who had seen the carnage of Constantinople's fall, who commanded armies and, through brutal sieges, was personally responsible for the massacre. This is who Vlad actually was. However, witnesses described his battle hard, and witnesses described Mehmed's battle hardened veterans refusing to advance further because of what they saw. Some even say that Mehmed himself turned his army around. The most powerful man in the world was psychologically broken by the sight of what he saw. He came to crush Vlad. Vlad, instead, left him traumatized because he couldn't allow the world to see that he had been defeated by a provincial prince. He couldn't allow his enemies to see that he had been broken. So he waited, plotted, and made sure that when Vlad finally fell, the story would be all about the Ottomans' might and the victorious conquest that made him crush his enemy. The narrative had to be controlled there. Vlad's arrest. In 1462, Mehmed couldn't kill Vlad directly because Vlad had supporters. Hungary's king was interested in him after seeing what he was capable of. A direct assassination would have been messy politically and would have led to Mehmed's own defeat and everyone pointing towards him. This would have also created many questions and would have given Vlad's allies reason to rally around his memory. So Mehmed withdrew simply. He let Vlad's own enemy, do the work, and Vlad had plenty of them. His own brother Radu was in Ottoman service. The Wallachian boyars, the nobles who ruled the country, had been systematically destroyed by Vlad's reign of terror. They had seen their power stripped away, their lands, their families destroyed. The king of Hungary and Vlad's Christian ally had their own plan for Wallachia. He didn't want a powerful, independent Vlad ruling there alone. He wanted a puppet that he could control. When Vlad, desperate and isolated, fled to Hungary seeking aid after being overthrown, the king of Hungary made a calculation. He arrested him and kept him in prison for 13 years. This case is different from your usual medieval imprisonment because of what Matthias did to justify it, to explain to the Pope and Christian Europe why he was imprisoning what were supposed to be Christian heroes fighting the Ottoman threat. Matthias's court produced documents later that were supposedly showing that Vlad had offered his allegiance to Sultan Mehmed. Letters were also there claiming that he was a traitor to Christendom. Modern historians almost universally agree that these letters were forced fakes, but the damage was already done. Vlad's reputation as a Christian hero was destroyed. He went from being the scourge of the Ottoman to being labeled a traitor who collaborated with the Sultan himself, and there he sat in prison while the world forgot about him. 13 years in prison. Just think about what that does to a man psychologically. This isolation and the knowledge that everyone you fought has abandoned you, that your own allies are your own jailers. The return. But then came 1475, and something changed entirely. It became politically useful for Matthias to release Vlad. The Ottoman threat was becoming dangerous once again. Maybe Matthias thought that he could use Vlad as a tool in a larger game, or perhaps even calculated that Vlad, who was broken after 13 years in prison, would be easier to control than the fierce warrior that he had once been. Either way, Vlad was released and sent back to Wallachia with the goal of reclaiming his throne. This is where everything became critical, because we started to see cracks in the official narrative. Vlad retook his throne in 1475, or at least 1476. This much is true, and less than just 2 months later, he was basically dead. 2 months, that's all Vlad had after 13 years in captivity. 2 months as the Prince of Wallachia, and in those 2 months, something happened that killed him. The official story says that he died in battle, which is a glorious last stand against the Ottoman forces. A heroic death fighting the ancient army, but there are huge problems with this story. Firstly, the timeline doesn't even match. Some sources give conflicting accounts of when he actually died. On some accounts, we see that he died in December 1470, while others say that it's January 1477. Moreover, some sources are so vague that we can't even pin down the date within a span of several books. Secondly, the huge issue is that his location is disputed. Where exactly did he die, in which battle, and which Ottoman general was present there? All the accounts contradict each other so thoroughly that historians still argue about that basic thing, which is the place of his death. Thirdly, and possibly the most disturbing part of them all, there are many theories about what killed him. Let's talk about the 3 versions of the death of Vlad the Impaler that we know, but just know that each of them is equally brutal. Before we reveal how he died, please subscribe to the channel if you are interested in more videos like these. Versions of his death. Let's talk about version 1, which is often regarded as the official story. Here, Vlad was leading a small force against Ottoman positions. A larger Ottoman force suddenly ambushed him. He was overwhelmed and killed in combat. His head was cut off and sent to Constantinople as a trophy. This story benefits everyone. It makes Mehmed look powerful. It makes Matthias look like he sent a brave man to a brave death. It gives Vlad a heroic ending, because now he was fighting for his religion and died. The problem here is that those details don't hold up at all. If this was a major Ottoman military victory, why wasn't it documented in Ottoman records as such? Mehmed was obsessive about documenting his achievement, yet the sources on Vlad's death from Ottoman historians are super slim. Version 2 of his death is an interesting one. In the chaos of battle, Vlad was wearing armor and fighting hard. He was mistaken by an Ottoman soldier, by his own men, and was killed by him. Think about the desperation of that moment. It was a small Wallachian force, probably outnumbered, fighting in winter conditions, in darkness, and in absolute chaos. Vlad, in the thick of it, was fighting hand to hand in the confusion. A panicked soldier drove a spear through him, and by the time anyone realized what happened, Vlad was already dead. If this is the truth, then Vlad's supporters would have enormous motivation to hide it. Moreover, it would be shameful for the religion of Christianity to see that its leader died like that. It would also be a disaster for Matthias, who sent him there. Much better to have a story about a glorious battle, right? But what about the most disturbing possibility of all? Vlad had just retaken his throne and was absent for 13 years. The noble now controlled Wallachia to a power that Vlad couldn't even comprehend. They didn't want the old terror returning. What if Vlad were instead assassinated instead of dying in a heroic battle? It wouldn't be by accident, but deliberately. Getting murdered by a conspiracy of boyars, the same families that had assassinated his father, that had killed his brother, and had a long history of conspiring against Vlad, might have become so powerful that they removed their own ruler. If this happened, it had to be covered up. It would expose the boyars as regicides. It would show that Vlad, for all his power, couldn't protect himself even after reclaiming his throne. The best idea would be to make him die in a heroic battle, according to the account. The corpse. But here's the most interesting yet disturbing detail. Vlad the Impaler was a man of huge symbolic importance. Whether you see him as a hero or a villain, he was legendary in Europe and still romanticized in today's world. When he died, you would expect his body to matter like every other ruler's. His body should have been documented, either buried with honor or displayed as a trophy, but instead, Vlad's corpse vanished. His head was only sent to Constantinople, and Mehmed had it displayed on a stake, which is an ultimate insult to his whole rule. The man who impaled thousands was himself impaled, at least symbolically, but his body, that's where things get strange. The monastery at Snagov near Bucharest is traditionally believed to be Vlad's burial place. It was excavated in the 1930s, and archaeologists found a grave that was marked for Vlad. However, it was empty, or, more interestingly, it only contained animal bones. This is where conspiracy becomes even more undeniable. Someone deliberately removed his body and made sure that his grave was empty. Moreover, someone erased his final evidence. Why would anyone even do that? If Vlad died a heroic death, why didn't they display it or give him a proper burial and publicize it? The only reason to hide a corpse is if the circumstances of his death were way too disturbing to be revealed, but there's more. A different discovery was also made at Kamana Monastery, a site where Vlad himself was found, which he himself had founded and which was much closer to where the battle took place. An archaeologist there found a headless corpse in 1950 with a skeleton that dated to approximately the right period. So what exactly happened to Vlad's corpse? Let us know in the comments what you think, and if you liked the video, please subscribe to the channel for more brutal final hours like these.